Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and I'm going to be doing my May wrap-up today. This is for the second half of May. The wrap-up for the first half will be linked below. I don't know how much I'm going to gesture with this hand, but I want to say right away, partially because I just want to show you, but also as an explanation, I have multiple band-aids on my hands because I have taken up carving. It's that autistic urge to get into as many different crafts as possible. I'm on a new medication that has upped my energy levels and allowed me to be creative again. I'm feeling kind of uninspired by / unconfident about a lot of my other mediums that I use, so I decided to do carving, partially because I happen to have some very nice wood come into my possession. Apple wood, because we had a little apple tree that died right after we planted it, basically. The two other fruit trees we planted at the same time in the same area, perfectly fine. A peach and a prune. I don't know if this was just a much less hardy plant to start with. The main part of it I turned into this, looks like it could be a cane. It's not quite long enough, so it's a club with a nice big end to it. Got rid of the bark and softened out a lot of the edges and got rid of all of the limbs and then oiled it, and now this is what it looks like. I also have made 2 wands out of some of the smaller branches. This one has been shellacked, so it's shiny. This one has just been oiled. I haven't shined it up yet, but one is straight and one is got a little hitch in it. I think they're both cute. And then I also filmed some cute little animals that I've made. A mama fox, a baby fox, and a little turtle. The baby fox wasn't specifically meant to be, but he ended up with only 2 legs because I planned badly, so now he's a baby fox with his mama fox. So anyway, I'm feeling really good, having fun with that, but I have been cutting myself. Despite instruction from YouTube videos and my dad. I've got books. Let's start with Where the Rhythm Takes You. It is a persuasion retelling, but in my opinion, if you go into it with that mindset, it's better that you don't. Because a lot of my favorite moments and my favorite emotions between the characters and their relationship that I liked is not carried over. It's first of all, it's transferred to YA, so they're teenagers, so they make some significantly worse decisions than the characters in the books, even though in the original, even though they made some bad decisions. These are significantly less thought out and unnecessary and overly dramatic. So I didn't like a lot of that. The part that I liked was I liked that a lot of the side characters were way cooler people than they were in the original. It also, I don't like how there's kind of a person with a fake chronic illness in the original, and I don't appreciate any chronic illness being portrayed as fake. So that wasn't done in this book, which I appreciate. And I really liked the setting. It was very well conveyed how beautiful it was and the richness of the culture. There is less modern culture and new modern interpretations of the culture, and this also tackles grief and like bad ways of handling grief mostly. It took so long to get around to handling the issues that the main character spent most of the book being annoying, which is unfortunate. Whereas I really like Anne Elliot. Yeah, basically everyone was more likable in this version except the 2 main characters, which is not really what you want in a romance retelling. But if you got it as just a regular YA romance with enjoyable side characters, an enjoyable setting, and a lot of complicatedness, and it being a second chance romance, then you would probably like it. Then I actually got around to reading another of the books from my most recent haul, Blood Brothers by Nora Roberts, the first of a trilogy, and This is from the 2000s, like 2007, so it's not like her newest work, but not also not her oldest. And I didn't like it that much until like the 3/4 mark, and then suddenly I was like, yes, now I ship the romance. Now I am invested in what's gonna happen to everybody. Whereas I guess it was a really slow build up to that, and the romance just wasn't. It was entirely based on physical attraction up until very late in the book. And the next book is going to be about some very different people from these, so I'm hoping that their chemistry will work better for me, and I really think it will because it's been set up a little bit in this book. 3 childhood friends who have activated magical stuff when they were 10, and now it comes back to a demon type thing comes and attacks the town every 7 years for 7 days, and they have to fight it off. And now these 3 women have showed up in town, 2 of them who knew each other previously and 1 who didn't, and are somehow connected because they're able to see the demon fiddling around before the 7 days starts, whereas nobody else besides these 3 best friends have been able to see them, so like they have some kind of link to the magic. Then the Siren of Sussex, which is a proper romance, meaning no sex scenes, which is a kind of gross use of the word proper, but so is clean. There's no real good word for that that's just a single word. It's all either patronizing or sex shaming, which I don't really like, but just saying no sex scenes seems to be so difficult for people. Though I do personally appreciate having one word that can sum up 3 words, there isn't a good one that doesn't have bad connotations yet that I know of. Anyway, the book itself is quite good and not sex shamey, in my opinion. It is about a lady who wants to make a good society match and marry a rich man so that she can take care of her sisters, because she is an orphan and her aunt and uncle who have been taking care of them are not that rich. They're landed gentry, but they're not very high up. They don't have a lot of excess money running around. So if she's going to have the money to take care of her horse and also her, I think, 3 younger sisters, she needs to marry well, because women can't really have jobs at this level of society, and if she goes to a lower level of society, those jobs tend to not be very good, because not that it's great now, but then jobs for women especially were scarce on the ground, didn't pay well, and you were treated badly. And it looks into that a little bit in this book, and I like that. And anyway, the way she thinks she's going to make this good match is by showing off on her horse, because she's not really good at talking and like flirting and ballroom type stuff. So she thinks if she can show off very well on her horse and be very stylish and beautiful on her horse and show people how good she is at that, that someone will be impressed enough to marry her. And so in order to do that, she needs to find someone to make really attractive riding habits. And she knows that there are these courtesans who wear really gorgeous ones, and she knows who they're made by, so she's going to get one for herself, and that leads her to meet the hero, Ahmad. So it's all about them gradually falling in love as he makes clothes for her, and they try to help each other out because he needs help to get his business started, so he needs to like show off his designs publicly. And he has a cousin who's more like a sister that he also takes care of, so he knows what that's like. And it also talks about racism because he is half Indian, and it talks a little bit about the colonization of India. Yeah, it talks about a lot of things. It covers a lot of ground in, I think, almost 400 pages, and it was pretty sweet. I got invested in the romance fairly quickly, and I do like love between different levels of society. I think that's fun and interesting to me. And she also makes some really good girlfriends who are going to be the heroines of the next few books in this series. Then Living Nations, Living Words. This is a poetry collection of First People's poetry, so I think it's all over North America, not just Canada. In fact, I'm positive it is. I hadn't actually heard of Joy Harjo, but my library has one that's one collection entirely by her and two that she's edited, I think. And this one has to go back to the library promptly, so I'm telling you about it before I finish the last quarter. I'm 3/4 of the way through, and I like it a lot. There's only about a lot of the contributors only did one poem. Sometimes they're like a page like that, and sometimes they're like 8 pages. So they vary in length a lot, but usually not more than 1 or 2 poems per contributor. So there's a lot of different Indigenous authors in here, and quite a few of them have published works on their own or have been in other anthologies. So like this is giving me a lot of resources of people to look up, especially some of them have written like fiction books, which is my favorite stuff, but I am also interested in reading some of the other poetry collections by these people because I really liked their particular poems. Okay, now I guess that was 3 romances and a poetry collection, so let's do the other 2 romances. One was Yes and I Love You, which is in the same series as What If You and Me, which I loved. This one I didn't like nearly as much, but it did give me some of the same feelings. It is about a woman who has Tourette's and anxiety, falling in love with someone who is an ADHDer and is part of an improv comedy group who do have bookings but are really looking to get somewhere a little farther. They all have to have jobs on the side of that to actually live, and they like to go full-time, and she is a reviewer of entertainment, all different kinds. So she goes in to review their improv, and they have also met each other at her office that she uses that lets people rent space for creative projects, and he is the barista at that place. So they have a few points of contact and a few like things in common because she likes entertainment, he does entertainment, and he starts teaching her improv lessons because it is a good way to help with some types of anxiety, and that's how they get to know each other, and it is pretty sweet. Then Quark. This I found on a TikTok account, I think called the Black Romance Connoisseur. I'll try to link them below if I can find their account. This was introduced as a alien black romance. So the aliens have a lot of phenotype looks in common with black people, the particular aliens that are involved in the romance, and the main characters they're falling in love with are black. So that's kind of how it works. This was a very weird story. It is another one of those that doesn't follow the usual beats. It has kind of its own funky beats. And it could go on the no third act breakup list. It has a third act disagreement or miscommunication, but it's really not that big of a deal. I really liked how it handled some of the intercultural problems of miscommunication, where we have an earthling and then we have an alien who have different cultures and are trying to fall in love. It has a bit of a mating trope where he like sees her and he has some chemical weird thing go on with him, and that's his person for the rest of his life, which isn't my favorite thing, but her side of the romance is more organic. While some of the miscommunication was handled really well and made sense, there was also some that was over dramatized and kind of contrived. So like there's a mix of that, and I am thinking of reading more of this series because it was mostly enjoyable. I suspect later on in the series that will get more refined. Okay, then we have a middle grade, The Witch's Apprentice, which I thought was the final book in the series, but apparently this is going to at least be a quartet because the ending of this one was clearly setting up for another book. And what's interesting is that the first 2 books were like 3 hours, then 4 hours, and this one was 6 hours. I listened to them all in audiobook, so they're like getting longer, and like yeah, I don't know how long the next one's gonna be, but very enjoyable, about a 9-year-old black boy from New York who stumbles into some magic and actually has some relatives involved in it, but his mom didn't want to be involved, so he had some distance, but he decided to get back into the family magical work. This one is kind of sad. I really don't like the characterization of the mentor character in this one, because I really liked her in the previous ones, and she behaves very badly in this one, and like is not respectful of children, and like that's a thing, very realistic, but based on how much she respected this particular child, her apprentice, in the previous books, it feels really weird and like artificial. It doesn't feel organic to the character, and is kind of forced for plot reasons in my mind. So I didn't like that aspect, but I do like the continuing to learn more about this world, and definitely this kid's relationships with the other kids that he has been kind of helping him out with his magical business. But yeah, I'm also used to middle grade main characters making very logical decisions and like taking time to think things through, and not behaving like YA teenage characters, which is not necessarily accurate, because 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds all don't have their prefrontal cortex developed, but still, usually there's a very different level of logic used in middle grade versus in YA. And the logic was not good. The logic of the main character was not good in this book. So yeah, there were a lot of things along those lines that were like, this feels different from the previous two, and like it's trying to just force the plot to go in a certain direction that doesn't make sense for the characters. But hopefully that book has been used for its bridging purpose, and the final book will make sense and bring it all home in a good way. Then I have 2 nonfiction, both of which I listened to on audiobook. What Doesn't Kill You is about a woman with Crohn's who has lots of gut issues, and it is a memoir style with also informational chapters about how to find a good doctor, and this is how terrible the American healthcare system is, and intersectionality, like how this was bad for me, but I'm a white woman and this would have been so much worse for people of color and people who didn't have as much money to invest in this as I did. And like, I really appreciated that she was very acknowledging of her privilege, and gave statistics and stuff for both people in her demographic and also lots of other demographics, and illustrated how terrible insurance companies are, which is something that I also have strong feelings about. So I really liked that whole book. It was really interesting and cathartic as someone who is chronically ill. Update on that, my doctor and I are now pretty sure that I have EDS, which is a connective tissue disorder. It would make my pain and general fall apartiness make sense, and that's really vindicating to have a name for it and have my doctor agree that yeah, it's not normal for my experiences are not the experiences of a physically healthy person. It's very much in line with a lot of stuff that I have learned and heard from the chronically ill and disabled community, but it's like super information packed, but also really interesting, and mixed information, pure information, with the narrative of going forward, how she got diagnosed and how she experienced things. And I read What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat, which I heard about from Gaia Athena's channel. I highly recommend their channel. And this one was not such a memoir style. It didn't like go in order from childhood on. It like interspersed personal anecdotes with statistics and information, and like I thought about doing what you need to know from this book, which is a little series that I do, that I've done like maybe 2 of, where I pass on a ton of information from a book, but I think I'm too tired to do that right now. Plus it would help to have the physical copy so I could put notes in it, and I had the audio copy. But basically what you need to know is that fat people are fat because of their DNA the vast majority of the time. Diets do not work, not just fad diets, but any kind of diet. Your metabolism will change to make you be a certain amount of fatness no matter how much you eat. You may lose weight initially because your system is in shock, and it takes time for the metabolism to adjust, but it will adjust to put you back to homeostasis, where your DNA says that you should be. And I actually did a paper on the ineffectiveness of almost every way of losing weight, even surgical, which in the book she says that surgery sometimes works, or works more than diets, but in my collection of studies that I looked at, even that usually doesn't work long term. It'll work short term, but not long term. Various fad diets, increasing exercise, all of those don't work. I did find studies that said that decreasing calories overall forever would change things long term, but now, thanks to her book, I realized that those studies that I found were probably funded by diet sellers like Nutrisystem, and therefore are suspect. But yeah, she had quoted tons of studies that showed that long term is not possible, even with regular restricting, not even just specifically fad diets. So yeah, therefore it is not fat people's fault that they are fat. Therefore, mistreating them will not lead them to be healthier or more convenient for you, as in the case of fat people on planes. It will simply lead to them feeling horrible and having more negative health outcomes, because apparently, according to her book, most of the negative health outcomes for fat people are actually from fat phobia and the stress that that induces, and diets that induce stress on the body, rather than the actual fatness. So yeah, those are the major points, but she explores all of those in depth and also goes into fat phobia and how prevalent it is, which I didn't realize how bad, like, how much like street harassment and harassment on planes and harassment by family members, and like how much it was. I only knew some part of it, so that was also really eye-opening. Don't be mean to fat people. Thank you. Oh, it also answered my questions about whether or not I count as fat, because she broke it down into, hopefully the algorithm doesn't hate me for this, but first of all, fat is a neutral term that is just a descriptor. It's not a negative thing, because fat people have reclaimed it and prefer to be called that versus various, what are they called, euphemisms. But she broke it down into the slim fats, maybe, the small fats, the bigger fats, some other type of fats, and the super fats and the infinifats, which are like 4 categories, which are sizes 1 to 2 extra large, 3 to 4 extra large, 5 to 6 extra large, and then anything bigger than that. And she broke it down that way because even amongst fat people, we have to recognize that the bigger you are, the fat phobia is worse. It's harder to find clothes, it's more expensive to find clothes, it's more expensive to do everything, and the fat phobia is worse, and you're less likely to even have medical equipment that will work for you. And so how much more that is a problem for even fatter people, so that less fat people need to acknowledge that, like, it's a spectrum and we are not all equally oppressed. But I wear sizes 1 to 2 extra large, so I am on the thin end of fat according to her scale. Which answers the question, because I am aware that my body is not what society would consider the correct shape / size, but also fat people don't seem to think that I am also fat. So there's that. But yeah, having a name for it is nice. Was that loud enough for you to pick up? He just came in and started complaining at me. Yeah, that was really interesting. And she also went off about the American healthcare system. That is also validating to hear other people feel the same way that I do about that and like have statistics to back it up. Hey, it's Annalisa from a little bit later. I finished 3 more books in the next 3 days after filming this, which doesn't usually happen. So I decided to include them in this wrap up so that they're all very fresh in my mind. First of all, Proud, the young readers version by Ibtihaj Muhammad. This was the version that was available on audiobook from my library, and it was really good. Ibtihaj is an Olympic fencer. She wears hijab, and so it's all about her journey to becoming an Olympic fencer whilst wearing hijab and how those two things interacted, and just being a woman who is going to the Olympics in sports, a woman in sports, a black woman in sports. So it was really interesting and I really liked a lot of it. There was an issue where she kind of had a lot of classism instilled in her by her parents, and had a crisis when she got out of college and couldn't get a fancy job and had to work at a dollar store, and everyone around her looked down on her for that rather than blaming the world that wouldn't give a hijabi woman a job, and also just looked down on it in general and like didn't appreciate the fact that those are important jobs and that people don't matter less because of the jobs they do. And it was resolved by her getting back into fencing rather than by recognizing that people who work minimum wage jobs are not lesser than other people. So that was irritating, but it does go along with the ambition that is no doubt required for pretty much all Olympic athletes. So like not unexpected, but kind of you should be aware of that going in. Then I read A Dark and Starless Forest, which I heard recommended on Twitter before it actually came out, and I was looking through my screenshots on my computer, what's that front screen, whatever it's called, to clear them out, and found the recommendation for this, and my library had it. And I read it mostly for it being a fantasy with fat rep, and specifically a fat woman on the cover, which is super hard to come across. But also it specifically has plant magic, as you can see. She's got a little flower there. So I was excited about that. It is darker than a lot of the fantasy that I like. It is called A Dark and Starless Forest. And it also says on the cover, one by one they disappear. So like, you know going in it's going to be creepy vibes. But this was kind of like worse than I thought it would be. And I'll put trigger warnings down in the description because there's some stuff that's like very prevalent throughout the entire book that could be really upsetting for some people. For me, made me skim parts of it because I didn't want to exist in that world with that going on for very long. It is about a found family of witches and the guy who is teaching them. So it's like 7 or 8 girls and 1 non-binary person, and one of the other girls is also trans, so there's some trans representation. I think 4 of the main characters are fat. I really liked the representation of the different found sibling relationships. That was really cool. And emotional. It didn't grab me right away, but that's because I don't really care about creepy things. They don't intrigue me very much. But when things started like kicking off in more of an action sense by page 100, that was more when I got into it. But yeah, I do recommend it, especially if you like dark fantasy stories. And then lastly, The Murder of Mr Wickham, which I heard had a autistic character in it. And so I was excited to get to it. And it's not own voices, but it does say in the back that the author had a sensitivity and authenticity reader for the autistic rep, so I appreciate that. And as far as I'm concerned, I think it was done quite well, and I really felt for Jonathan, who's the autistic character, and I really liked his relationship with Juliet, who is the teenage character. They're both teenagers who he investigates the murder of Mr. Wickham with. This is a story taking place after all the Jane Austen novels, where pretty much every couple is represented at this house party except for the ones from Northanger Abbey, who are the parents of Juliet, so they're just represented by her. And like Fanny and Edward from, I think, Mansfield Park were the only ones who I didn't really care for at the start of the book, and so I was hoping that maybe one of them was the murderer, because it comes down to it has to be one of the members of the couples fairly quickly. But as it went on, I became more fond of them. I really liked the way that she went on to characterize them, so I was really feeling like I didn't want any of them to be the murderer, because they would get in trouble more so than I would think badly of them, because Wickham is horrible. I'm not super into mysteries of this kind with amateur investigators, but I liked how this was handled, and the setting, and how it was fairly true to Jane Austen, as well as bringing in the younger characters who had less care for propriety, and therefore were much easier for a modern audience to understand. And I'm happy to have another positive experience of autistic representation, especially in historical fiction. Back to the old me. So that's the rest of what I read in May. I've been really enjoying these nonfiction reads when I consume them via audiobook, so if you have trouble reading nonfiction and haven't tried audiobooks yet, I recommend that. But also, yeah, still reading a lot of romance. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!